Great. Great. Just wait until everyone's in. Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday, 17th of April, 2026. You're here today to talk about the AU Patient Summary FHIR IG. We've got a few things on today, but before we start, I'll just do the acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of which we are gathered today. We pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and extend the respect of all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people. And we acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators, and healers. I am here today on lovely Ngunnawal land in Canberra. It is very chilly. Yesterday was 5 degrees. I think it was a lovely, cool temperature down here. Our agenda today, we'll start with usual business and updates, approval of minutes, which I think we will defer. And Danielle, your hand went straight up to that.
It did because I'm not sharing. I'm not seeing your shared screen if you're
Oh,
sharing.
okay.
I am.
I can
You
see.
are? Okay, this
Yeah,
must be a
I am.
meeting.
Can see it.
Hang on, let me just try and see. Oh, yeah, no, it was a meeting. I found
You
it.
think
Sorry.
good? Oh, that's always good to check. Thank you. I always forget to check if people can see my screen, so it's good to have that confirmation. Uh, Again, today we'll talk a few about the usual business updates, and then we'll jump straight into the ballot reconciliation. I know that last week we did last week on the 10th, we talked to some of the setup of how we do ballot. We'll touch on that again, and then we'll jump over to Danielle to talk through the tickets. And if we have time, we'll jump into that QA.html walkthrough, which I am actually looking forward to. So usual business. I do note that we didn't send out the minutes of the last agenda, so I think possibly we'll have to defer that to our next one. So in the emails out, we'll send both the minutes of the 10th of April and the 17th of April, this one here today. So I'll jump straight to Brett to talk through some of the high level discussions around the technical transition and its progress. Brett, are you happy to talk?
Yeah, cool. I'll just keep it pretty brief. You may have heard this in a call. We are moving to Microsoft products with HR7 Australia at the moment. So you'll notice that the calendar entries and things coming to you are now coming from a workgroups account. So that will continue. And also emails too are coming from that same account. So it'll look a little bit different, but it works the same. So those lists and calendar events are coming to you. The other thing to note is there is a plan to lock down the mailing list to co-chairs and project lead use. This is kind of just to prevent any noise coming from other bots and things that can access the list. So if there's anything you really need to get out to the groups, go through the co-chairs is the way to do it, and we'll make that's not yet in place, but it will be very shortly. So if you think you should be on that list, it'll have to be discussed with the co-chairs, and I'm happy to support like project leads and things, people that need access to the lists as well. That's probably enough on that. There is a plan to move from Zoom to Teams at some stage. I'm on a promise to do that before June 1st. So there will be some movement there. Some of the other work groups have already started using Teams for their business, but there's a few things to clear up for, I think, AU Core and the Patient Summary project move there.
Yeah, great. And thanks, Brett, for that. And Danielle just posted in the chat there around the note takers that have been called, which you've discussed and called out. I think that's we're just blocking those until such time as we get a firm decision put forward. And I did note that last week we had some last meeting we had some problem with people jumping into the teams. I think that was probably just a setup
Coloring event, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that was the calendar problem where Teams was automatically applied where it shouldn't be yet.
yeah, yeah. Microsoft loves being integrated, doesn't it? Even without us. So yeah. Great. Thank you, Brett. Is that all from you?
Yeah, that's all from me. Thanks, Tim.
Great. Okay. Awesome. I'll jump to the next slide, which is our Spark testing event. It's a one-dayer.
Actually, could I just,
Yes,
in,
Danielle.
in talking about the transition, so one of the things that we've been doing is sending out the meeting invites for those who are interested on the AU Patient Summary list serve. The fortnightly IPS joint call with Australia and New Zealand. Now, I attempted to send an update because the US went on different. They had daylight savings, so it moves back to 7 a.m. For everybody, and I attempted to send out an update, but uh, that didn't work. Um, Partially, I think, due to the transition that's happening and getting that right. So, um, if people have that meeting series in their calendar from me, can they please delete it? We'll send out an updated one using the new process, but I have no way to edit the incorrect one that's currently in your calendar. That kind of failed and has died. So just wanted to let people know the fortnightly IPS Wednesday morning calls with Australia. If you've got those going on in a meeting series in your calendar, delete them. We'll give you an updated one soon.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Danielle. I'm just checking through mine. I do have not one for next week, but the week after. I think there's one with the Americans.
Does it say 8 a.m. in yours?
It does say 8 a.m.
Yeah, that's the one I'm no longer able to adjust.
Yeah,
Please delete that.
that one there. Okay, deleting right now. Well,
Yeah, you can delete the series. Yeah, and I'll send through a correct one for the adjusted US time soon.
great. Thank you. Any other points of business anyone would like to raise? Now's the time. Okay, great. I'll jump through to our next slide, which is our Spark testing event. It's a combined testing. It's for one day only. You cannot access it on the QR code shown to you today. It is now closed and being reviewed, and the registration will be soon sent out. I don't know if we are able to, if you've missed the cutoff date, if we can add you, or is it a pretty full event?
No, we totally can add you. The
Okay, we can.
EOI was to actually determine where and when we'll hold it, not to actually could you attend the event. So the votes are in. It's Brisbane. It's the
It's
8th of
Brisbane. Hey.
July. Those were the votes.
Yep.
So if you cared, hopefully you said where you would like to be. And everybody, well, not everybody, but most people said, I would like to be in Brisbane at the 8th of July. And so that is where we're going to be. We're going to go back to actually to the same venue you can see here that was incredibly lovely the last time we did this, that actually had Wi-Fi and internet that worked. Oh, I hope that's true this time. But yeah, that was good. Um,
Yep.
and so the registration email should be sent out next Wednesday. And part of that will be saying, hey, what are you interested in testing? But I think part of the focus this time is doing connected scenarios.
We
So
asked
we want to
Amazon
hear from
why,
people.
and they said that the technology.
S- Okay. We want to hear, we will be contacting people and kind of asking them, even in this registration form, about what are the different scenarios you actually want to use this for. So this is like next steps. Am I trying to use requesting to do booking or scheduling? And let's try to like build out some actual connected, tested scenarios to come together on the day. So yeah, it's going to be really cool.
Right. Love it. I was just putting it in my meeting calendar and getting my flights confirmed. Excellent. I hope to be there. Any other people have any questions about that, or I'll move on? All right, I'll move on. So in May we have a Connectathon with Rodden. I think this is all online for the Saturday, the 16th and the 17th of May. This is really a call out for people who are interested in delegates from Australia to provide a demonstration on the patient summary to support the work and the work that's happening in the EU around the conformant patient summary. So if anyone here or knows of any software solutions or vendors that would like to participate or demonstrate or send their product over to be able to that can produce an AU patient summary or consume a AU patient summary is to please submit your interest. Danielle.
Yeah, I think just giving a quick update on that. We've got registrations from 10 different systems who will implement AU patient summary. It looks like we're going to have, so part of this is the cross-jurisdictional testing as well. So there's some chats going on with Canada to get them involved and some chats going on with the UK. It looks like there'll be a couple of New Zealand systems, at least one US system, like doing US PCS, not IPS. There'll be several IPS systems. Um, and I think I'm going to try to reach out to Switzerland and Austria, who look like they have published patient summaries to see if they can make any remote endpoints available. So this is really interesting. If you have something and you want to participate, Sparked delegation, which is myself and Heath, will be on the ground. And we're going to try to facilitate testing across the different Australian endpoints, the IPS endpoints, and like the other jurisdictions of what happens if you're trying to consume a different jurisdiction's patient summary, or what happens if we try to use an Australian patient summary like an IPS in like a different jurisdiction's system. So it's going to be really cool if you've got something available and you can like make it available, then please do. Otherwise, I think when we come back from that, which is probably in a month's time or so, Heath and I will do a report back on like, how did this work? What did we find? It's going to be really interesting.
And probably one thing to note, we're already in having weekly meetings to get prepared for that as well. So if you want to jump on board, please do it quickly.
Yeah, great. And I see Shelley's just posted in the link to the page that it calls out as well. So yeah, exciting. And I'm assuming would registrations include people that don't have a product and just want to come along and listen in?
Well, it's an international connectathon at Rotterdam on the weekend, so it'll be like midnight in Australia.
Yep.
I'm not really sure that's people's vibe on a Saturday. Um,
I
there
have
might
young
be
kids,
something
so I'll
for
be up at that
virtual.
time anyway.
Yeah, I think really the thing we're really asking for here is um, endpoints to try to test out the assumptions, or really, I guess, the design of Australian patient summary and validate the decisions that we've made in Australia and how they actually stack up against the implementations across the world. So I'm not really sure there'll be anything to listen to. It'll be like a connectathon. We'll be sitting there quietly tapping away and then talking about an error.
Yeah.
It's actually a face-to-face meeting. It's not a virtual meeting. So
Oh,
Danielle and I will actually be in the room, but leveraging the endpoints for the systems that are working with us to actually then coordinate with other international vendors to actually make connections. So yeah, it's pretty much it'll be myself and Danielle as the person in the room coordinating connections between the systems here in Australia and
okay.
recording the results. So it's not like our normal connectathons as such.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point. I did mention that it was online, but it's online access. I misread that point. So
Remote access, yeah.
yeah, remote access. Yeah, perfect. So coordinate with yourselves, get your endpoints to Heath and Danielle. and they'll facilitate that connection. And if you are online to call and support, that would be most appreciated, I'm assuming. Excellent. Anyone else have any comments or would like to call out anything for the Rotterdam experience? Very jealous, by the way. Would love to attend. Excellent. Okay, I'll move on to the ballot. So just a quick recap. Balloting is a formal process that HL7 uses to get feedback and comments on specifications prior to publication. These are the links that you can see. We can post them in the chat, or if you aren't aware, thank you, Shelley. Those are there to give you governance and how the process around balloting works and the decision-making process. That goes on there, so I won't talk to that. There is a link down the bottom there for if you want to see the seminar for voters link there, that's Zoom recording. Danielle?
I reckon for today's meeting we could probably, because I kept these slides in there, but I think we've covered several of these a few times,
A few
so
times
I
now, yeah.
probably should have hidden them. Apologies. I reckon we can just
Skip through.
move straight to the one that is the one that says like persuasive, non-persuasive, and just make sure everyone's comfortable with that terminology, and then go into the ballot items. I think we can just go straight to that.
I noticed that they're not on these slides.
Okay, well
No, it's
then,
not in there.
oops.
Hmm.
So I summarized and that one went.
Oh, well, hopefully everybody remembers that we're going to be making decisions that are persuasive, persuasive with mod, non-persuasive, non-persuasive with mod, or considered for future use. Those are our options, I think.
Okay, I can quickly bring them up. I've got a link here to them if we just want to quickly have a quick discussion about them.
Oh, I reckon it'll be good because we've got most of the people. Hang on, let me have a look at the people on the line. I think most of these people have been here at the previous calls. And we ran through it in the last one about what those terms mean. We can go into it in more detail if people, and at any point you really should put your hand up and say, look, can you just confirm what does non-persuasive with mod mean? I reckon we can just talk about it there. But yeah, that's exactly it.
Yeah. So did we want to quickly go through this again? Just
Oh,
for,
sure.
yeah.
I will
Yeah.
do incredibly quick, high
Yeah.
level. So considered for future use is where we're deferring it. That just means not in R1. We're going to keep it on our backlog. There's lots of reasons we might do that. Persuasive means that both we agree with the argument being made and the change, and we just do it exactly as described. That's incredibly not common. Persuasive with mod is much more common, where someone puts a change forward to the group, we look at it and we go, yeah, no, that we should actually be making a change. But often through our discussions, we identify other parts of the specification that should also be changed, or maybe the change should be slightly altered, and that's persuasive with mod. Not persuasive is where we do not agree at all, either with the reason or the suggested change. Sometimes that's actually because it's out of scope. Like they're suggesting a change to like a fire extension. We can't do anything about that. So we say non-persuasive and we tell them why. Um, the next one is non-persuasive with mod. Also really common, where we don't agree with what's been raised, but by reviewing this, we've identified that we could make the specification clearer or that maybe something else should be adjusted. And so that's non-persuasive with mod. So I think you'll see almost all of our changes come through with persuasive with mod or non-persuasive with mod. So that's my very fast summary.
Very well done. Thank you, Danielle.
Thank you.
This is also recorded. It was also recorded in the last minutes, the 10th of April, and there's plenty of links to the page which has this called out. So thank you. Okay, we'll jump straight into ballot then. Danielle, did you want to run through these?
I probably should, shouldn't I? All right, if you can stop sharing, I'll start sharing my screen and that can let me just sort of wander around the screen.
Cool.
How much time do I have left in
Oh,
our schedule?
10:22. let's check the calendar.
Okay, can you keep me to time?
Yep,
So we
I'll keep
probably only want to spend about a max of what, like 15 minutes on each of these, or maybe less?
Okay. Yep, that sounds about right.
All right, so yeah, let me know when
Yep,
we're coming up to it.
I'll just button when we're at time, or I'll give you a minute
Yeah,
warning.
give me a few minutes, give me a couple minutes warning, not just
Okay.
one. That'd be great.
Good.
Um, oh, okay. So quick summary. These are informative changes. So what we've got here is there's a change suggested that we should consider adding more examples. There's one that says there's just too much text. There's one that talks about known absence of data and what should be included. And then there's one that is talking about the no known X guidance from AUPS condition and allergy intolerance profiles. These are all informative and kind of what I was saying earlier. You can see persuasive with mod, you can see not persuasive with mod, and there's a couple that have just been suggested to be not persuasive at all, and we can see if that's true or if there are any enhancements we can make. Um, are any of these more important to people than the others? Just before I just start from the top. I mean, do feel free to suggest, or we'll just go from the first one and just keep going through them in this call. All right, I'm not hearing any. So let's go to the first one. And I'll just also check who are the participants online. Let me just see if I can get a visual of that for me. I see that. Here we go. Who's online? Okay. All right, good. All right. Okay, so this first one, called Consider More Examples. Um, there's a suggestion here, and it was raised by, let me just pop up. So this was raised by Ricardo, who's from the agency. Um, and this one says, suggests that we add more examples to ensure they cover all variations, such as additional sections and suppressed data, etc. Now, for people who aren't familiar with the term or variations, let me just go to the AUPS. Um, we talk about this in a few places, but this is one of them. Um, oh, can I just check, is that zoom in big enough, or would people like a bigger one?
Bigger is always helpful. Thanks.
All right, I'll go in one extra zoom. And I see your hand up as David. Did you want to comment on something?
Um, yeah, and then you just asked me about this seeing it, and I'm trying to remember what I was going to tell you.
Oh,
Uh,
sorry.
it'll come to me in a sec.
All right, I'll keep going, and then as soon as it comes to you, pop your hand up again.
Oh, I remember we were talking about examples, weren't we?
Yeah, so the JIRA issue was saying I suggest more.
Sure. Wouldn't
And I
wouldn't that be
suggest
great?
covering all variations. Sorry, David?
And And I guess my experience as, I guess, maintaining production systems and building systems and things like that, there's always, and sorry, and also when we're utilizing a standard that's trying to be so flexible to all of a sudden try and recognize every possible combination, all we can hope for is that when people are using it, they contribute their example to the pool. So, because most people will have similar, I guess, challenges, and I guess so. In order for us to take more on, happy to get examples from the crowd. I guess would be my approach.
I mean, I think as the project facilitator for Patient Summary, I would love that. Like contribution from the community of examples that match their circumstances that we can say also conform to Patient Summary is like it's the perfect goal, I think, that we're
Yeah,
looking
no.
for.
And I think it's also an opportunity for us to act like a governance arm, to look
Mm.
at that example, to see how they're complying with the standard and
Hmm.
whether there's anything that's tricky. And I must admit, the last meeting we had, there's something stuck in my head too about it when you were talking about this is an international standard that has to implement national rules, and how our approach to that. So, and again, yeah, I've actually been dreaming about it, but it's crazy. But the idea again to recognize what the example is that's also confronted you with this choice. And I think this is a great crowd for you guys to say, hey, look at this mess I'm in, or this is this challenge. What are they trying to show me? Cool. Anyway, that's
Yep.
close.
No, I think I agree with all of your comments. I'm going to, for the crowd, talk about for people who haven't needed to read all of the detail of this, what's an additional section? Um, I'll go back to this. So there are the recognized sections that are both in IPS and AUPS. We don't add anything special in Australia. We localize a bunch of things to work within our Australian ecosystem and clinical workflows, but it's all the same sections. What we all recognize though is there could be more. So undefined sections are additional. So people can have reasons too, and I think I saw some of that from eHealth New South Wales, and I saw some of that from Telstra Health at the last Connectathon. Need to be able to share additional information when they're sharing patient summaries for their own workflows, and they're called additional, like they're undefined. We don't know what they are. Everyone can have their own thing. Um, so that's one of this here is to say, what about an additional section? There's one around what about suppressed data. Now, I'll go to show you what we have. And I will ask people to keep in mind that this is for R1. This is our first release. We did a scoping and a prioritization. And our prioritization said that we would focus on problems, conditions, meds, immunizations. That was what we wanted to get right, and we didn't care about everything else. Um, and then we've had a series of work through the clinical focus group that has given us some um, clinically relevant workflow related examples for things like the interstate GP visit and the referral to specialist and allied health. So what we've got are examples that do problems, allergies, meds, immunizations. We've also got, I think, what are some bonus extras, frankly. These aren't required for R1 based on how we've done scoping. What we don't have are additional, like stuff that nobody's defined. We do have, if we talk about suppressed data, we already have some examples of that. So based on this, my position, here it is. So here's what I'm thinking. Our current set of examples basically meets the agreed R1 scope. Plus, like we already do more than the R1 scope. We also do suppressed data. Um, Personally, I think for the stuff around additional sections, I agree with David that that kind of thing actually has to come from people who are using these rather than being artificially constructed additional sections. So I think we need donations of examples from the community that we can start referring to that are actually meaningful about the kinds of additional sections that exist. So I don't think that's a requirement for us to like close this out. I think that's just a call to people to say, if you have something that you have defined and would like to contribute, please do. Um, and so there's a suggestion here that, although it's not written there, I think in the comments, Ricardo said that he suggested an ex additional example that covers patient story. It's not an additional section though, because patient story actually is a defined section, so they're not the same thing. But I do think an example with patient story would be great. Um, but I think again that actually has to come from the community. She requested the agency to submit one, and I think Graham Grieve has also submitted one that we could work on and refine and bring in. But
Are
over,
they saying they load everything into the data, into the story then? If there's only one section, then they're putting everything in the story.
well, it would have to be patient story content. Like if that's um, like the suggestion is we could close out this JIRA if you would just allow for the addition of a contributed patient story example, which would be nice anyway. Tim, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just gonna, is this because I know that one of the Connectathons when Tarek was around, we presented the annotations example where we could annotate and on the patient summary, there's the ability that you can annotate a bit of that patient story in those certain resources, those specific composites. So I wonder if it was that could be a good example to bring.
Well, that doesn't address the sections. So what's being called out here from the comment is the patient story section is I think
The actual
really what
section.
the initial um, issue raiser was asking for and said would satisfy.
Yeah.
No, but Tarek did actually have a patient story
Cool.
section
Yeah,
when
he
at
did.
that testing
Yeah.
event. So I suggested that, you know, Ricardo had been looking at it, or the agency's been looking at the patient story, and we would, might be a good one to bring forward from the agency if you've got one that you could contribute.
Yeah.
So the initial, and I think it's on the fence as to whether this is persuasive with mod or non-persuasive with mod. Because I think the position here is it needs to come from someone. We shouldn't be artificially creating this. I think it's good that we would include a patient story, but that would have to come from the agency or someone else if that's going to come in. So that's really the disposition that's put forwards. Um, are there any other comments or questions about this item? All right, so I'm happy to keep it with persuasive with mod, noting that this would require a donation from either the agency or someone else to satisfy, um, because it's not one of the sections that we have spent time on and can actually agree this is nationally how we do it, right? This needs to come in from someone who's actually implementing this other section. Um, so I'm happy to motion that that this is persuasive with modification and that we accept the disposition as written.
Great. So we have a
I'm happy to
motion.
second that.
Mhm.
Excellent. Okay, I'll put up a poll. All right, there should be a poll in front of you now. The current motion is it was for, sorry, Danielle, that this is
Persuasive with mod.
modification.
Yeah.
Yeah, and noting those comments, those good comments about a donation, I like that word, the donation from the agency. Yes, I'm sure we will be able to support this one.
I've added my vote in the chat, Tim.
Oh, yes, thank you. And that's a +1 for the record from Michael Wilson in the chat. And if anyone else can't access the poll, please just put a +1 um, uh, in the chat for either a affirmative, negative, or abstain. Excellent. I'll give that. We've got a couple more people needing to vote. Give it a few more seconds. We have 75%. That's fine. Oh yeah, and we've got two there. We've got Michael Osborne. That's done an affirmative there. So I'll just end that poll. Bump. I'll share those results. So as you can see, there'll be we've got 94% affirmative. So that motion has passed. Thank you.
Could you read out the numbers for the minutes?
Okay. So we've got for affirmative, we've got 17 out of 18, 94%. We've got no negatives and one abstain.
So if
The
we include
17 plus 2, so it's 19
Oh, 17 plus
affirmative,
2, yeah.
19 affirmative. 0 negative, and 1 abstain.
Yes, that's correct.
Alrighty, so I'll pop on to the next one. Let me just close these other jurors I've got. Okay.
Perfect timing. That was roughly 15 minutes. It was actually
Ah,
30 minutes.
probably should have taken less, but it was an interesting topic. I always think more examples are great, but it's an infinite rabbit hole. You
Mm.
know, if we're talking about all possible permutations, as David said, you just keep going down. So we've got to stop somewhere for a release. Okay, so the title of this one is Too Much Text, Making It Difficult for Implementers to Process All the Info. Um, so here we go. This section, okay, and what we're talking about is conformance requirements. It's saying it's gotten very dense and it makes it difficult for implementers to follow. And he would like to suggest we have more visual, reader-friendly elements like tables or flowcharts to improve readability. So it's a high level, I think, if you will, kind of enhancement-y thing, not a please change this in this way. David, your hand's up.
Yeah, I guess my thoughts on this one quickly are that as an organization adopting the standard, there's many roles within that organization that have to be aware of what's going on, including the architects. And they're the ones that have to get at that level, right? They're the ones that are going to have to embrace this particular, uh, I guess, what are you calling it? Perspective. So to say that there's too much text, I'm sorry. Um, Sometimes things are complicated, and sometimes things get really nitty-gritty. And if especially standards in order to know when to stop, I guess too. So, and I guess I'm sort of speaking. I was fortunate to be a part of the financial services standards, like banking standards and stuff like that. And so, fortunately, that when there's money's involved, everyone agrees quickly. Um, but this is a different challenge here. But as far as too much language, no, you need to stop and read it. Yeah, people that are in the health industry will understand what it means, and they need to get their head around it. So I'm not too worried about the amount of documentation because most of the time we run, where the heck is your documentation?
Mm.
Well, yeah, so yeah, so that's what I think about this one.
And the proposed disposition is non-persuasive. Um, Not to say that we couldn't add in diagrams. I think the proposed disposition is non-persuasive for a couple of reasons. It's a really generic, like, you could make this better suggestion, and that's always true. We could always make things better. And if someone has a specific idea that we could look at adopting, we could. There's almost how much effort do you put into a first release? The contents of this page and all the contents of this page have actually been surfaced in multiple meetings where we've run through bullet points and checked with the community about the wording. So I'm fairly confident about all the content we currently have, and in fact, we have JIRAs to add more text. That will be the subject of next meeting of let's add more text. So that'll be interesting to go through. So I'm confident that the text that is present is something that the community has reviewed and ratified through multiple different meetings. Um, so look, we're just going to do it. We're just going to do a quick run through. This is what's here. It's talking about the entire requirements page. So we have an overview saying, hey, we've got conformance verbs and you have to do profiles and actors as some of the requirements that we don't repeat and just refer off to. And then we've got various summary sections along with some really detailed sections to just call to people, what does it mean if you've got a mandatory element? What is this whole missing data kind of business with subsections under that around one for empty sections, one for known absence of data. Um, I'll skip on because there's four subsections. Um, Then we've got the suppressed data section, which is specific about those requirements. We try to do explanative around must support and obligation. This format is common across currently all the HL7AU specs that use it. So it's got the same heading, it's kind of got the same table to say what are your obligations, how could you see it? And then it's all about what do you actually do with each of these different things. And it tries to get as specific as possible because these are the questions at the moment that have come out of um, all the different testing events and connectathons that implementers have asked, but what does it mean if I do this? So that's tried to be reflected in a whole bunch of these, but what does it mean in this circumstance, both with the conformance and then an example? And that's really, I guess, what the rest of the sections are. Primitive elements, so it goes by data types, resource references. For those of you who've read this should be familiar for you. It looks the same in AU Core. Um, so yeah, I do not believe there's too much text. Um, I don't actually know where we'd put a flowchart. I don't know how you flowchart this. What are we flowcharting? So I would love to see. Hmm, I agree with the fact that this is non-persuasive, and part of that is because it's such a high-level comment. I would be really interested to see the really specific suggestion of what could be flowcharted and how. But I think at this level of just why don't you do flowcharts, I have no idea how to action that. So I think that has to be kind of non-persuasive with which has gone, hey, please, we've got the comment there. Please come back with something actually quite specific so that we can consider it as a group. Um, any comments or I guess questions about that one?
I was just looking through like AU Core as well for their
Mm.
general requirements. It's kind of the same. Like you've got the
Mm.
same amount of detail, if not a little bit more reduced, but it kind of follows that same format layout and talks to the same points. So again, I think I agree. More data, more information, the better. And it's up to implementers to do the diligence around reading the material and ensuring that they understand it. I would like to know if the others have a problem conceptualizing when they read through what this is talking about and if they get an understanding for it. But I think I'm okay with where we're going towards.
As an implementer, I would tend to agree that the amount of detail on that page is necessary because there are so many specific cases, and otherwise you end up in, oh, do I apply this at this element or this element? Which code should I use? And you go round and round and round in circles and waste so much time. It is much more useful having all of the learnings from the previous however many months summarized very, very clearly, and I think this is as concise as we could have done this guidance on this page. And we've spent a lot of time working through wording with shalls and shoulds, and like to summarize that in a diagram, I think you would lose a lot of the value for implementers. I don't think that if you were able to have diagrams in addition, that would be necessarily a bad thing, but without having something clearly proposed, I don't think this is persuasive.
Keith, your hands up.
I'm not suggesting that we make this change. I agree with the resolution, but just a comment or observation. I have noticed that US Core, for example, and also IPS has recently done this, that they've just separated a separate must support page, which really doesn't change the content. It just moves it into perhaps a more specific page, and it leaves the general requirements for more general requirements, whilst the must support is um, just about that one topic, which is a significant part of this page.
I will make a comment there that this doesn't actually even say it's the must supports. It just talks about that entire page. So we're making an assumption. I mean, I think it's that section, but I don't know. It might be the bit above it that they're talking about needs flowcharts. This is just not specific enough of an issue for us to actually do anything with it.
Agreed.
So I'll motion that we that this issue is not persuasive, with the disposition defined, which is a succinct summary of what I talked about, including the suggestion that we would be happy to consider like specifics. Like if someone has a specific proposal that they could bring to us on how to improve that, then, great, we'll consider that.
Happy to second, Marika.
Great. So we've got a second, we've got a motion, we've got a seconder. So I will just re-find the poll and oh gosh, how do I do this? I got to redo
You have
it.
to relaunch. So you have to hit
Relaunch.
the ellipse next to it and
Yeah.
then find the relaunch option and do that.
Great.
Yep, that's
Yep,
it.
I've done that. So just for context, we have a motion that this is non-persuasive, but happy to take suggestions on more specifics from the agency when and if. I heard a few good suggestions about the US core going into more granular sort of subsections, I'm guessing, or subpages of what they've done, but I think this is really good. Great. A few more people to vote if you can. All right, and have we got one affirmative from Michael Wilson in the chat there? Anyone else? I noted Michael Osborne, you put a chat one in the chat. Are you able to do that and that as well? Okay, might be offline, but I'll stop it there. All right, I'll end that poll and I'll share those results. And so we have, including Michael Wilson's +1 affirmative, we've got 21 votes for affirmative. That's 90%. So 21, it's 19 affirmatives out of 21, no negatives, and 2 abstains. So that motion passes. Excellent.
So for the minutes, that's including the chat, 19 affirmatives?
19 affirmatives.
Okay,
Correct.
cool. All right, I'll go back to, let's have a look now. Next one. Righto. So this one is suggested to be not persuasive, but with modification. So this is one of those ones where the initial suggestion for us to consider is that the majority of co-chairs have looked at this and gone, yeah, I don't think so, but there are some changes that we can make to the specification to clarify the situation that's put in front of us. So let's go through this JIRA. So it's section 214, and I just closed that. Let's go to it. Is that guidance? No, that's conformance. That's conformance. Yeah, okay. So this will be in missing data. Okay, so that's 214. This is the bit around missing data, empty sections, known absence of data, which quick summary for people talks about 4 kind of scenarios. We've got the first one about no known X, no history of X. Those phrases are used because that's how the FHIR standard talks about stuff. There's then talking not, well, you don't have anything for the entire section at all. Then we've got the workflow reason. That's more of an Australian thing. That's not particularly an international thing. We've started doing that through AU Base around some of the recent work in, oh God, Brett, was it R5 or R6? Either way, it's been around for a while. For AU base. And then the next bit is what we've seen pretty commonly, like in AU core and US core, where that's like missing data for a particular element. It's mandatory, and so you maybe stick a DAR on it, like a data absent reason extension. So that's what's in this section, and it's split up then into the four different cases, and with a set of requirements about what you will do for representing each of those kinds of four things in an AU patient summary. So, coming back to this juror, and that has been raised by Stephen Chu. Is Stephen on the line? Let me just check. Sorry, I haven't looked. Yes, you are. Hi, Stephen.
Yes.
Did you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, okay. So what I am actually, well, what I actually want to say is that semantically, so the no known data is different from absence of data, and I would prefer that these I sort of two constructs kind of are separated, and if we are talking about no known data, then it shouldn't be subsumed under the heading of known absence of data. So known absence of data say that, look, I know that I do not have any information or that I do not have any data on this topic, whereas sort of a no known X is that is a positive assertion categorically saying that, look, I know for sure that the patient doesn't have X. So the two are semantically very different. So in my opinion, I think bundling them together under one section heading is a bit misleading. And I would like to see a separation of the two concepts if possible.
Okay. And so coming back to what we currently have in the IG and kind of relating what Stephen was saying, there are four cases called out here, and there are three in the heading. So I think with that in mind, let's have a look at the initial kind of disposition to be considered for this group and what changes we might want to make to it. So the initial disposition was saying not persuasive with mod. So what it's saying is, okay, I don't get it. It's saying it's not persuasive to separate no-no-next into an independent subsection, but it actually is already an independent subsection. If we, like, each of these have their own subsection. There are four, I swear. Hang on, let's just check. So there's missing data. We do have empty. Okay. We have known absence due to workflow. And then we have no known X. So there are actually four separate subsections present.
I think what Stephen was suggesting was bring it out alongside of, like
Yeah,
bring it up a level.
Oh,
yeah,
making it a
that's one of
sibling.
the better options that I would prefer to see to bring it outside that section because, as I said, semantically they are two very different things. One is saying that, look, I know that there's no data about certain thing. The other one, no known X, is that I know categorically for sure. So that semantically doesn't mean that there's absence of data, but it's a positive assertion that I know that the patient doesn't have this condition, or the patient doesn't have this medication, or the patient doesn't have this vaccination. So they are semantically distinctly different from data absence.
I I mean, I do totally agree. They're mutually exclusive. All four of these are mutually exclusive. They are not the same thing at all. So all four of these are different things.
Yeah, but the header itself, 2.1.1.4 says missing data, empty sections, known absence of data. That header doesn't cover the scenario of no known X.
So I guess that's why the initial suggestion, and I wasn't at that conversation, is to say there are four different things. The heading only talks about three. We should put all four in the heading. That's, I guess, what the initial suggestion for the community to consider is.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the options, but to my opinion, because they are semantically different, a better disposition is as Heath said, to bring it out into a separate section because semantically it is different from the other three things.
The only reason I don't like that is because I think we have this lovely intro section, which, I mean, we did do a lot of work. Marika can attest to this because you were at most of the meetings, Marika, where we did try to talk about this and get the wording right, that these were, while mutually exclusive and semantically different, kind of related to each other. And so that's why we have this like grouper heading. And then we've put like the four separate cases that are semantically different underneath that, and then had each of those four be siblings.
So if I were to take a compromise, then at least the 2.2.1.4, the header itself needs to be changed. Otherwise, it's semantically misleading.
Yeah, I totally agree with that.
which is what the proposal was. But can I also, just in your discussion then, Stephen, you were talking about uh, specific drugs, specific conditions, and like the history of something specific, whereas I don't know that that's necessarily what this section is actually talking about. We're actually talking about more of there are no known medications as a general statement rather than known diabetes drugs, for example. So,
whether you are targeting a specific condition or as a global statement global statement of positive assertions of absence of anything. Like say, for example, there's no known medical history, there's no known medication. So that's a categorically global positive assertion that there's nothing that I know of, which is different from the absence of data, which simply means that, well, there is no data at
where
all.
yeah, I get that, but I guess that this is in the context of empty sections. And so we're actually saying, why is this section empty? Well, it's empty because there are no known medications, not statements along the lines of no known diabetes medications.
I don't know that I agree with that. That's just one of the four cases.
Yeah,
Like we have
that's what
outlined
I
four
take.
cases.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I was trying to struggle, so it is that fourth one there. I was looking at the next four dot points, which doesn't talk about the specifics.
Yeah, so as I said, my preference is to sort of bring that out into a separate section, as you previously suggested.
Uh,
If that is not going to be entertained, then at the least 2.1.4, the header itself needs to be revised.
just to confirm, I wasn't suggesting it. I was just um, interpreting what I thought your suggestion was.
Right. Anyway, so I have said my piece, so I'll leave it for the group to come up with a disposition.
Look, I mean, thank you, Stephen. Uh, uh, my preference is to keep it under a major heading so that we can have a grouper that lets us talk about the cases and then point off to the subsections. If we make them all siblings, we don't get this as like this kind of intro to those four separate cases. I think this is a good intro, like having one. So I would be very supportive of having the updating the 214 title to actually include that fourth case that is in this section. Which I think that's what the initial suggestion is here. Are there any other comments or questions from people on the line?
So Danielle, I think
Yeah.
my original suggestion is either change the header the 2.41 either change that header or bring that section subsection out to a separate section. So if the disposition is to agree to change the header itself, and I sort of tidy up the wording, so it still will be persuasive disposition
Sure.
and not persuasive with mod.
So let's change that to be persuasive with mod. Did you want to make a motion, or would you like me to, Stephen?
Well, I'm happy for you to.
Okay, I'll motion that this is actually persuasive with mod, with actually the words kind of written here, which still say we're not going to do it in an independent subsection, but it does say the mod part is to update this. So it's persuasive with modification. So that's my motion.
Great. Can I have someone second that?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Um,
Oh,
before we move forward, I mean, just it was seen as not persuasive because we interpreted it as basically asking for an independent subsection. That's what is not persuasive.
No, I'm asking for either or. I'm not asking for exclusively that. That's what my recollection is.
I guess
That-
that's reaction to this.
absolutely.
Okay.
And so this suggestion is the motion changes the title or looking into the
Yes.
title. Yeah.
No, it's changing the title to
Changing.
to include no next.
Next.
So that's why it's non-persuasive is because no, we're not agreeing to 2.14.
Yeah.
But the mod part is to add no next into the existing one, hence not persuasive with mod.
Not that part of it's not persuasive. So moving forward for this, do we just outline that we do want to change the title as part of this ticket? And
I mean, this does already do that.
Which
The
it
thing that
does.
we're arguing
But
about,
we do, yeah.
and we are often on the fence of is something persuasive with mod or not persuasive with mod. Like we agree on the change we want to make.
Yeah.
The question is,
Well,
I-
there's a
make it
clear
a
suggestion. I
Yeah.
mean, where the suggestion is what we're saying is not persuasive.
Look, I'm not fussed sort of one way or the other, so happy to dispose whatever it is and then move on that.
There's the complication that it's in the same ticket. So if we split the tickets out, that
oh
would
no,
probably
that's not the suggestion. The suggestion is not to split the tickets out. The question is, do we tag this as persuasive with mod or not persuasive with mod? It's exactly the same change. It's just categorization of the resolution.
Hmm.
I don't care. I don't mind either way. I agree with the change that we're going to make. I think it's a good idea. I'm happy Stephen has seconded it. It's just like, where do we land? Persuasive with mod or not persuasive with mod?
There's a motion on the table.
Okay. The motion on the table is persuasive with mod.
Sorry, that was your timer. Excellent. The motion on the table right now is, sorry, could you say that one more time?
Persuasive with modification. We will change the title of the section 214 to include that fourth case of 909X that had been missing from the title.
Yeah. Excellent. So the current motion is in play. Any affirmative? Thank you, Michael Wilson. In the chat, just pop your vote in the chat there if you can't access the vote. We got there. I did have my hand up, but I think we talked through this one in depth, and I think we got there in the end. Great. Okay, I will end that poll right now. I'll share those results. For the numbers, we've got 19 out of 27. That's a 69%. We've got 0. That was affirmative. So 17, 18, 19 affirmatives, 0 negatives, and 8 abstains.
And that includes the chat.
Yes. Yes, that includes the chat. So
Okay.
19
Cool.
includes the chat. Excellent.
Righto. Gonna
That
be
motion
changing the
passes.
title. Cool. Last one. Okay. So, alrighty. Let's go to this one. Okay, so this one's called Reference to No-Known X Guidance from AUPS Condition and Allergy Intolerance Profiles. So some of this is going to be in relation to, let me just bop to the No-Known X section for people. Do I not have a link? There it is. No-Known X. Okie dokie. So here's the generic overall stuff, right? We're going, hey, when you can say no-known X, as in you can say someone has either no known allergies or no something in specific. In this case, the example is no history of cardiovascular disease, which does have a SNOMED code, by the way, or like no allergy to penicillin or something. Then the system should be populating a section entry in accordance with the profile-specific implementation guidance. This is the key bit I think that the JIRA is going to refer to about how are we making sure that people can find this profile-specific implementation guidance. We've got an inline example here, which talks about the allergy, and then we have another like kind of conformancy statement that says, look, this is preferred because noting here, this is a should, not a shall. You don't have to do it. We would just really like you to. So this approach is preferred to the other way you can do it, which is using section empty reason. And of course, the reason we would like you to actually instantiate a resource and include it is because it allows useful things like date timestamps, and then it's also in accordance with the FHIR standards guidance around how you represent this kind of information for allergies and meds and conditions and whatever else we have. And then we have an inline example around the generic one, around no known problems, just so people can go, oh, look, it's a SNOMED code. I get it. There are examples on the examples page that talk about this, so people can see it in its full kind of glory, but that's what's in line in this section. So kind of like this is starting to be what we're referring to here. So coming back to this JIRA, and in particular, this is talking about condition and allergy intolerance, but not about the meds, which also has some stuff on this. It's saying it doesn't have any profile-specific guidance related to No-Known-X. And it's suggested to include a reference to the guidance on No-Known-X and the AU core guidance in each use case, given there will be specific stuff in the medication profile, which is, I guess, why it's left out. So the initial thing we need to consider whether or not this is appropriate is suggested that this is non-persuasive. It's suggested it's non-persuasive because the approach in H47A UIGs is to reference guidance at the source. The source is AU core, and there's a reference to that. So let's just have a quick look. So we're talking about here the allergy intolerance and condition. So we'll go allergy intolerance, we'll go condition. So at the moment, I think the profile specific implementation guidance is really light. It's just going, go look in AU core. So I'll click on that and we'll come back to it. In allergy intolerance, it's okay, it's also saying the same thing. So there's no additional stuff for AUPS. We're going, do what is in AU core. So we click on that. What's in AUPS? Sorry, AU core now does have stuff about the no known. And this one has the stuff. Okay, it's here. Here is where we have the no known. Okay, so coming back to the JIRA. Okay, that's why that's saying, look, we don't copy and paste this. We already have a reference off to core and the core has that info. But hang on, who raised this? Sorry, let me just go up so I can see that. Oh, Heath. Sorry, Heath. Did you want to talk to this one?
I guess it's a matter of how many jumps did you have to go to get to what you wanted to see? so that we've got this section that's talking about things in specifics or kind of in general cases around conditions and allergies, but nothing about medications. But you had to go to each of the individual profiles, then link across to AU Core, and then actually read all of that sort of stuff. So I guess what I was suggesting is maybe adding something here under this section around no known X to actually go to the straight to where it is referred to in AU Core from that section. So given there will be specific guidance related to the code to be used, the change will be, sorry, I'm looking. I suggest to provide a reference to the general guidance on no known X and the AU Core guidance on the recommended code to use. So just basically looking to say, what is the code to use when there is no known allergies, no known medications, and also no history of conditions. So to actually put it here where we're actually talking about this general guidance, rather than having to jump all over the place and out to core and all sorts of places. I have no problem with it going straight to core. It's just that there's, yeah, had to know that you had to go to the AUPS profile for condition first.
It does literally say that. Go to the profile specific implementation guidance, but okay.
Per
I
the
mean, I
profile,
agree there's like 2 clicks you have to make.
per the profile specific, but which profile? So it's talking about allergies as examples. It's talking about
But
conditions as an example. I mean, to be honest, I don't like the term X, right? I don't know what X actually applies to. So we don't even have a definitive list of the X's. And there's one example there around no known problems.
and an example about allergy, but as you've pointed out, this is a general page. It's not a definitive list. And
And
this
no
list
reference
will
to
change
medications.
over time because we will build that out. It depends on how much duplicative content we want to do. I mean, I think this is good enough for R1. Um, because I think we have to be future looking. We add on to this. We might do it with immunizations. We might do it with other things. This describes the rules. Like with empty sections, we don't go, oh, well, it's this section, that section, and the other section. This is a general, go look at your profile specific implementation guidance for the profile that you're trying to implement. That's what that says. So you go there. If it has it, great. Then that's what you do. I mean, I don't think this is unfathomable for people.
Probably the glaring thing is to have anything about medications, but I understand you're saying it might be a growing list, but the 3 mandatory sections are pretty important sections.
And we would only link to AUPS, not directly to AU Core. And then from
That's
AUPS,
fine.
you would link to Core, which would just be it's the links of go look at your relevant profile. So instead of getting people to go click on the profile, we would decide that it's better to have a bullet point list here of all the different profiles.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't like it, but maybe other people do. So let's open that up. What do people want? Is this good enough? Should we do more stuff? What do we do? Does anybody care? Maybe they don't. This is I think, a very editorial kind of thing. There's no actual change to what we're doing. It's do we insert a bullet pointed list or not?
I
I
know from my perspective that I like to have use cases and sort of where it will be represented. To Heath's points about what is X, conceptually, it's a for what I think is it's a placeholder for the thing that comes after X. Like it could be a not known data element XYZ. But to have an example on the scenario would help me get there as well. Like what
Beyond like this example and that example, and then the examples page that has a row for
Yeah, I
99X that
know what you're
tells you
saying.
everywhere we actually do it. Like
Yeah.
it's so I
Can
mean I'm
can you
just
can you scroll down? Just there's
yeah.
a precedent set. Okay, so go
Mm.
down to the must support section when we're describing things like must support identifiers. All right, and we've got a definitive list
We
of
do.
keep going down.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there. I just didn't have the clicks to get to
Keep
that point. So here's the first
keep
table.
keep going.
I mean, I'm not really sure it matters. Didn't you just mean we've got tables of things?
Yeah, but they're very specific set of examples of where these
We don't
things
actually list the
relate.
examples of where you can find them, though.
No, I'm not talking about examples. I'm talking about the profiles. They're actually saying must support elements in organization is an organization.identifier. So for me, this is a very similar, helpful way of saying this applies to these particular profiles. And I guess that's all I'm alluding to with that no known X. Yes, we've got some examples around condition. Yes, we've got an example about allergy, but we don't have any mention about medications. And that's for me one of the most important ones because of the recent changes that we've made around medication statement.
If you're implementing medications, you need to read the profile specific guidance anyway. You shouldn't be just going, oh, I need to work out how to do medications because of no known X. So I rebut that, but look,
Sure.
this is in principle. I would rather get rid of one example because these are your requirements. We have helpfully provided an example. In fact, we helpfully provided two, but perhaps that's leading people on to think that we should be providing a conformance section of exact things, and I don't think we should be. This is an in principle definition of what you are supposed to do. I would rather rip out an example
I'm
than
actually not worried about the
do that.
examples. I'm talking about references to the actual profile specific guidance that this
Exactly.
relates to.
This is not expected to be a definitive, comprehensive thing around this. That's why we say, look here. We already have the saying, go look at your, we already say that. If you're implementing that profile, look at your profile. It will tell you what to do. Because it does. It has more than no known X. It has a whole bunch of things. You always need to look at your profile. Eh. I mean, normatively, this doesn't change the specification. I don't like
Uh,
this trend towards including specifics in the no known X's and empty sections areas. We don't do it anywhere else. These are the in principle definitions that apply to all things, and we say if your profile has rules on it, they will say what you have to do, and they do. We've already checked that. So I guess that's up to the community. So now we need to, I don't know, either have comments from other people because I think I've got one position, you've got one. So where do we go on this?
Danielle, can we have a look at the proposed disposition
Yeah,
and see
let
whether
me
it's
bring
close
it
or
up here.
those just saying, yeah, no, not persuasive, don't do anything. Okay. So, Heath, did you have a specific, do you want to propose an alternative to that?
I mean, my card basically says it. You know, the second paragraph is what I'm suggesting, and it's been found not persuasive. So,
Yeah.
you know, if there's a motion, then let the group vote on it.
So the suggestion from Heath is to include, I think, would be like a table that lists every profile we know of, which, is a fixed point in time thing, that will have guidance on no known X.
Correct. So
That's the suggestion,
Basically,
yeah.
allergies, conditions, and medication statement.
Oh, we'd have to check some of the others. I don't know if that's true that it's only limited to those three.
Well, they're the ones that have codes that need to be used for that purpose.
Yeah, but this just, I guess it's part of why I'm going for R1. Can't we just go, hey, go check your profile? We'd have to do an assessment. I know it's at least in those three. I've not looked at the others. It might be in more.
Or immunization was a candidate, procedure was a candidate, but we don't have that guidance in either of those.
Yeah, there's more profiles than that. So I guess I'm just being lazy. I'm an editor. And so for R1, I'm just going, I would just go, could we not just go, hey, check your profile. Your profile will say it, because we write it there. Um, I would rather not put it in this list, but I'm not going to like die on this hill. It's not wrong to include a list, right? It's still exactly the same thing. It's just
If the implementers
editorial.
feel that this is sufficient, then let it be.
Yeah, maybe we do a call out. Do people feel with a raise of hands that this is sufficient, or do we want to re-prosecute that? So if you do think we need to, if this is fine, just raise your hand. I'll get like a list of people who think this is okay. Just in the chat, just raise your hand. You think this is okay? I kind of lean towards it being okay myself, noting that we could defer it on, get more specific as we go. So I'll give you a couple more seconds. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 who said it's okay. Who wants to re-prosecute now? So just lower your hands, everyone that had said that. But if you want to re-prosecute, please put your hand up. Heath. By re-prosecution, I mean to take Heath's point about having more information about this. So the suggestion to provide a reference to the general guidance for not known X. Pretty silent on it. Okay.
All right. Then I'll motion that this is not persuasive with the resolution as written.
Okay. Can I have someone second that, please?
I'll second, Shelley.
Thank you, Shelley. Okay, so I will pop into launching a poll. So the poll is up. Current motion is that this is non-persuasive. Please vote. And one in the chat for affirmative there. Thank you, Michael Wilson. Okay. Just a few more votes, please, if you do see it.
What's the percentage up to?
67.
Oh, that's low. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even absent is good. Please vote. Oh, sorry, abstain, not absent.
Abstain. Yeah,
Apologies.
abstain.
Yeah, yeah. No, I was thinking
Not sure if
ballot.
you're
I
absent
was
that you
thinking ballot.
can.
Yeah. Oops.
Okay. All right, we've got 79 that's participated. So I think that's about right. I'll end that poll now. Thank you all. So we have 13, that includes Michael Wilson's +1 for affirmative. We've got 0 negatives and we have 7 abstains. I'll stop sharing so that motion
Um,
passes.
all right, I think that brings us to, oh, look, there were like slides that I did not use. Whoops, my bad.
That's okay.
I should just do a quick about what's next because I edited these madly while you, before, and you didn't see them, Tim. Sorry. Because I think we're almost at time, so we're not going to do the walkthrough. So no time now, maybe time next meeting. I just really wanted to go for people. So, okay. We've got scheduled all the ballot reconciliation items. So we did 6 last meeting. We did 4 this meeting. We got 1 in the next meeting. It's a biggie. So we're going to be prepped for that, and I'll go through it in a sec. And then we've got the remaining 3 after that. So that's the plan. At that point, we will actually be through ballot reconciliation, and we'll also have the opportunities to consider like kind of final, is there anything else that we actually think that we would like to change coming into publication? Because we're totally on track. And that is our publication date, just showing that there. So
Danielle, those dates are all in the future.
they are, yes. Are they not meant to be?
Weren't the first 2 what we'd already done?
Oh, oops. Did I not update that slide? I feel like I did, but I didn't, clearly. Oh well, good. Look, we've got so then let me go to this one then. Next call. Hang on, doesn't that match? We're not in April.
I think
This
it's
is right.
April.
We're in
We've
April.
done.
Sorry, go to slide 12, Danielle. I think you may have updated the first
I don't know
one.
what slide 12 is. Let me ask
Okay,
Kataral. Let me find
so
it. Where's slide 12?
keep going down. There it is.
Aha! Okay, so this one?
Yeah.
So
That
same
one.
deal, just different dates. 17th, 1st of May, 15th, 29th of May? Are they, oh God, must they be different dates? No, they look the same.
They just
I'm
pushed out
confused. When's our next meeting?
the
Is it not the 1st of May?
Yeah.
1st of May. Yep.
first one.
So I don't understand why this is wrong.
The numbers, the counts.
Oh, oh, right. What we're saying is, okay, I've wrongly apportioned things. Gotcha. To meetings that happened in some sort of past scenario. So let's move to the next 2 agendas. All right. So 1st of May agenda. So we're going to deal with these 2 that have been hanging around forever. These are like zombie issues for R1, frankly. They're important, but we need to come to a position. So I'm gonna ask for us to defer this means for reliably identifying an AU patient summary document by inspection. Uh, Reasons behind that, I've documented it. I hope that will be quick. But then we're going to spend the entire meeting trying to get to this position on what are we doing in R1 around this guidance on must support for elements that have multiple cardinality. We might not solve it all, but we need to get to an R1 position and talk about what do we do now, and then what do we defer, if anything, if we can't solve it all. So that's the target for our next call. The one after that is the rest of our ballot reconciliation stuff. So we've got 3 other items. That'll be the 15th of May. Heath and I will be away in Rotterdam doing all sorts of exciting testing things. But we've got these 3 to go through, and also AFMM2 of the AUPS actors. So that's the schedule for those next couple of calls. If we get through this in the 15th of May, that is the end of the ballot items, and then we can do a last call for any other changes at all, including editorial or informative, that we want to include into the specification. So the meeting after the 15th of May will basically be a report back from Rotterdam from Heath and I, and any kind of like final call items. So we've got the agendas of these kind of last two, these next few meetings already sort of sorted out. Yeah, that's what I wanted to present.
Great. All right. I'll that sharing on me. Hang on. Perfect. All right. So that's it, I guess. And I guess, is there any other business people want to call before we call this meeting close? Any comments, questions? Great. On that note, I will bid you farewell and have a great Friday and a happy weekend. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank you.
Yes.